All right. Unit 2, Population, continuation of Key Issue 2. The content objective for the second part of Key Issue 2 is compare the population characteristics of places at a range of scales using population pyramids, crude birth rate, and natural increase demographic variables. Specifically, describe how to read a population pyramid. Second, explain regions of the world with high dependency ratios and regions with low dependency ratios. Discuss how sex ratios vary between regions. Construct population pyramids. I don't know if we'll have time for this last one. All right, when we look at population structures, we look at fertility and mortality, but CBR is the most important factor and CDR is the least important factor. They construct, it's a distinct population structure known as a population pyramid. It has an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis represents males and females, so gender. And the y-axis represents intervals of 5 years, with youngest being at the bottom and oldest at the top. Here are population pyramids. We can see that on the bottom is the population, total population for each of these 4 locations in the U.S. And then also here shows the cohorts. 0 to 14 is known as the youth dependence. The labor force is 15 to 64. Those are going to be the labor force. And then anything above 65 is going to be the elderly dependence. When there's a population pyramid that's column like this, it shows that there's a low dependency. When there's a population pyramid that looks like this is a college town in Kansas. When it looks at a population like this, an upside down pyramid, this shows that they have a high elderly dependency. They have a high number of people that are 65 or older, and they're very dependent on the labor force, which is much smaller in overall population. Laredo, Texas, this shows you immigrants because of wide base. And this shows us they have a high CBR, so they have a high youth dependency, meaning the labor force cannot meet the needs of the youth dependence. All right, dependency ratio, too young or too old to work. As I mentioned, 0 to 14 are dependents. They're the youth dependents. 65 or older are considered the elderly dependents. If those 2 regions are larger than the labor force, which is 15 through 64, it puts a financial burden on the labor class. And that financial burden usually comes in the form of safety net programs like welfare, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, fire departments, police officers, etc. We see the highest dependency in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, 47% we see in Europe. And Europe has in some European countries, they have a high elderly dependency. All right. Looking at this, we see sex ratio. This is a diagram of China, who has been pro-biased, or they've been biased towards males, predominantly a patriarch society. When we look at, in general, developed countries have more females because life expectancy is larger than males, as much as 7 years longer. But here back to China, we can see that a large number of Chinese would be found with male. In this particular, it shows us a city where there's economic pull factors because a lot of males heading to those factory jobs in urban areas. China has a sex ratio of 114 males to every 100 females. And again, that cultural preference towards boys. We look at sex ratio around the world. more women than men are found in more developed countries, like in North America, Europe, Eastern and Western Europe, Eurasia. And then we see more men than women are often found in less developed regions. Less developed regions tend to be more patriarchal preference towards males. All right, skip that. We're going to skip ahead some slides here. We're going to move on to the second content objective of this lesson, and that one is going to be understanding and applying knowledge of stages to DTM. All right, your ICANN statements. This is continuation of key issue 2. Describe the 4 stages of the DTM. 2. Explain key characteristics and transitions for each of the 4 stages of DTM. 3. Explain how the DTM is used to understand population trends and social development. 4. Summarize why no countries in stage 1 of the DTM and there are possible countries in stage 5. Identify and explain the 2 approaches to reducing birth rates. All right, we're not going to have these because of COVID-19. All right, the demographic transition. The model consists of 4 stages. Some human geographers believe in a 5th stage. There's no country in stage 1, and a country has never reverted back or gone back stages in the DTM. The model can be thought to having a beginning, middle, and end. The model also helps us understand development of a country, specifically economic development, and we'll talk about that with transitions today. DTM assumes an inevitable course of events, so it does have a bias towards the development that stages go through. Here is a model of each of the stages, or here's a diagram of each of the stages. Stage 1, it shows with the CBR and CDR, they kind of ebb and flow. And with the natural increase rate, there really is no natural increase rate. Some years high, some years low, depending a lot on, because they're hunters and gatherers, depending on the climate and the abundance of food. And then you get into stage 2, we see high growth, high natural increase growth. That will continue throughout stage 2, and then the natural increase rate will slowly decline in stage 3, and then it'll rapidly decline towards the end of stage 3, and then continue to decline in stage 4, where we begin to see the CBR and the CDR meet, which is known as no population growth, MPG. So, or zero population growth or no population growth, ZPG or MPG. And so there's overall low growth, and as we move beyond stage 4, then there will be possible negative growth. All right, stage 1, no country. Stage 2, it's a country. The transition from stage 1 to 2 is the Industrial Revolution. A country must industrialize. Europe and North America were developing countries, and they industrialized starting with Europe in 1750. The United States about 100 years later. Countries that did not industrialize, by 1950, those would include Africa, Asia, Latin America. They went through the Medical Revolution. And the Medical Revolution transitioned the country from stage 1 to 2, where people now begin to migrate to urban areas and population growth spikes or grows exponentially. High growth. And this shows you the DTM with the Medical Revolution in Gambia. We can see that in stage 2 with the Medical Revolution, we see a natural increase rate spike. We see the birth go up and the death go down. And then we can follow the population growth throughout the stage 2, and we can see that with population, it continues to grow. The population in terms of millions of people, and the natural increase rate continues to grow. This diagram helps us understand that where each country began to see population growth, the Industrial Revolution with the first large population growth in Europe, and then 100 years later, United States. And then the Medical Revolution in the 1950s helped developing regions moving to stage 2, and that's why we see that rapid growth that we would see with the inset map right about 1950 here with the medical revolution, or that's the medical revolution there, and then we'll continue to 1950, seeing exponential growth. All right, stage 3. This is moderate growth. And when we look at the measurements, we begin to see CBR go down and also CDR narrows. And when we begin to see this, the NII, the natural increase rate, will go down. Most European and North American countries are in stage 3 in the 1950s. The transition to stage 3 is you have advancements in medical care. Women enter the workforce. Also, people move to the cities. Women enter the workforce and they have less children. So there'll be economic changes with women. In stage 3, we'll also begin to see, with advanced medical, we'll begin to see contraceptives or birth control. We can look at Mexico today. They would be a stage 3 country. How do we know they're stage 2? We can look at their measurements to see their population measurements, CBR, CDR, and natural increase rate. We see a sharp decline in birth rate, and we see the net accrued death rate going down as well. So with both those going down, when you take the CDR minus the CBR, you see a lower natural increase rate. And we can assume, based on Mexico being in stage 3, that many people are moving to urban areas. There's more economic activity. More women are using contraceptives. They're having less children, and women are also entering the workforce. Stage 4 is marked by both a low CBR and low CDR. Remember, stage 4 is when you see ZPG or NPG, no growth or 0% growth. So we have a flat line of natural increase rate. And this begins to increase because we see now the need for immigrants. We see more women entering the workforce. We also see advancement of medical family planning and contraceptives. And then also we see women that now have different lifestyles. And also stage 4 is going to mark when we see economic growth, where we see larger houses and intra-regional migration moving from urban areas to outlying suburban areas. Stage 4 country today would be Denmark. Denmark, we can see the world population continues to grow despite Denmark's population CBR declining and CDR declining, and their natural increase rate is hovering right between 1% and 2%. So we could assume people in Denmark live in smaller families. They live in urban areas or outlining urban areas, suburban areas. They also have, they live longer. They have better employment. Women have more rights. They have power in the workplace. All right, and population pyramids can help us understand where countries are in the DTM. If you're looking at stage 2 country in the 1950s, we can see that there's a high CBR. So exponential growth, which tells us they're DTM stage 2, meaning that they are probably just industrialized or went through the medical revolution if they're a developing country. If you look at 2010, we can look at Japan and say that, oh, in this particular year, now women are beginning to enter the workforce, people are moving to urban areas, there's economic opportunity, there's advancement in medical and healthcare. And then we can see that now by 2050, majority of the population is living in urban areas. They have advanced technology, advanced healthcare, advanced women roles in the workplace and in society. They have an elderly population, which creates a population crisis, or potentially a population crisis by 2050, meaning that Japan is going to need a pro-natalist policy to bring back the labor force to meet the safety net or social needs of the elderly population. And they're going to need a larger CBR to replenish the labor force for the cohorts of 15 through 64. All right, you can take a look at the U.S.'s population pyramid. The DTM stage 5 birth rates drop below death rates. There's a high elderly population. Usually this happens because of government policy. We can see that with pro-natalist policies will tell us there's a negative population, or we can see it with the one-child policy in China, which is now the two-child policy. Not all human geographers agree in stage 5. All right, and here we see an antinatalist policy that could push China into stage 5. All right, pro-natalist policies and antinatalist policies. Pro is governments are encouraging women to have children. Anti is encouraging women to have less children. Some of the ways they do this, improving education and healthcare. That's a antinatalist policy. Contraceptives is another way to control population. So, antinatalist policy. We can see family planning in both India and China here with these pictures. We can see family planning, which is an antinatalist policy, is largely not used in sub-Saharan Africa because of cultural traditions. With the country of Nigeria, largely does not use any birth control methods. Whereas we can see the largest being in the developed country of Germany, and then of family planning, the largest percentage, and then family planning in China, it represents a small slice of pie. All right, women using family planning. More than 2/3 of couples in developed regions use family planning. Again, it varies with developing countries, as we saw with China and parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and the main reason is because of cultural traditions and education of women. All right, that'll take us to the end of key issue 2.